All right. Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Contact Big Book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David, so good to see you. And I have asked our friend Michelle to read our preamble, and Michelle, you should, whoops, whoa, let me get that right. Okay, and you should see that on your screen.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you so much. And now I'm going to invite everybody to join along as we take a moment for moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholics, both in and out of the rooms, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I know that there are a couple newer folks here, so I'll just quickly summarize. We are a line-by-line big book study, which means our focus is an in-depth exploration of the punctuation and font style that Bill used in the big book. Actually, we go a little faster than that, but not quite. The purpose in going line by line is, rather than like in at least I was sort of in my AA journey, I was brought up on big book meetings where you did a whole chapter at a time, and it was, after a while, it got to feel like trying to drink from a fire hose. There was just so much information coming at you, and what I find is that by slowing it down, there is a real different message that starts to rise up from that, unfold from that. And so the other thing that we do is we categorize the text into 5 primary categories, and these will be in the chat, but I'll put them up on the screen as well, and you can see there questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. And the colors are, like orange, or highlight those in orange, highlight those, the directions and explanations in green, and promises in blue, and warnings in pink, and I don't highlight, that's why that's black, don't highlight the history. But what that really does for me is it, when I'm working with a sponsee, well, first of all, it helps me understand the text a little bit more deeply, and also it really helps when I'm sitting down with a sponsee and I have to identify, like, for instance, today we'll talk about the 11th step promises, and boom, there they are. And and I'll let you know at least what my opinion is about the categories as we go along. And our format is I'll talk on the text until the top of the hour, which for us on the East Coast is 7 o'clock a.m. And then we'll open it up for your comments and questions and insights and all of that. And then just FYI, this my portion of the meeting is being recorded, and we post that on a YouTube archive if you want to, just the audio, no video. So we remain in line with the traditions, and so that said, anyway, I'll open it up. We are starting with we are on page 85. We've been talking about into action. Last week we went in depth about the 10th step and the 10th step process, and now we're about to begin the 11th step, and we are at the near the bottom of the page. We begin with "much has already been said," and just a couple things. I just have rather than do a little mini dissertation, I just have 4 key points to keep in mind as we're reading along. And you can see them in the chat. So today's reading begins with a promise that if we have carefully followed direction, we will receive strength from God. Notice how this promise about strength fulfills the prayer we recited back in step 7, the whole idea of strength, and we'll touch on that in a minute. At the bottom of 85, it's suggested we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer, and just as we go along, think about what discomfort or uncertainty might we run into when talking about them. What motivated Bill to add that text? And then on 86, we're directed to conduct a 6 question nightly inventory of the day. I don't know why I made that a question. Sorry for the typo. What benefits can I see in the questions? And lastly, one of the most important 11th step promises detailed near the bottom of 86 tells us we'll be able to employ our mental faculties with assurance. Notice how this promise seems to contradict the common notion that we sometimes hear it in meetings, like I'm here because I'm not all there. And the book is promising us something very different than that. And so anyway, beginning on page 85 near the bottom, much has already been said. Almost this whole paragraph almost the whole paragraph is a promise, except for the last sentence, which is direction. So much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. And I think that's really, I'm just reflecting on that, because this notion of feeling infused with a sense of the divine and a higher power, I think it's a critical part of sober living, so that see, for years God was just this being, or this distant force that I reached out to, or maybe I felt connected with. I don't know. I mean, I know I was not drinking, so something was going on, and something good. But this notion that the higher power is actually living within me, and is not a distant force that I somehow try to relate myself to, that it's an entity or a being that I have a relationship with, that is part of my thinking, part of my body, part of how our friend Brian D likes to say, part of how I move through the world. And I think that at the time when Bill wrote this was a radical notion, that sort of very intimate relationship with God. And also, and again, as I mentioned earlier, notice on the first line there, it talks about strength. And remember, what were we asking for in step 7 with the step 7 prayer? Grant me strength as I move out from here to do thy bidding. Amen. And just think about that, because that also entails the notion that these things come to me not as a product of not drinking, and not as a product of accumulating time in AA, and not even as a product of simply prayer and meditation alone. They come as a product of seeking and doing His will on a daily basis. And I think that alignment is absolutely critical. Like when we align ourselves with God, God then infuses Himself into us, into our thinking. So, to some extent, we have become God conscious, and that can be taken as we are aware of God, but also our consciousness can become, I don't want to say it can become deeply influenced by God. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say aligned with God, because there's not, it's certainly not a peer relationship by any stretch. But I also think this is interesting. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. And I think that notion of a sixth sense is also, it's a great metaphor, because we're talking about like our think about our senses, our sight, our hearing, our touch, all of those things, the five core senses, and they really help us move through the world, help us live our lives, help us navigate situations day in and day out. And this is very much the same thing. It's like something that is always with us. And I think, again, that very intimate relationship is absolutely critical. And then, I love it, because the last sentence in this paragraph, it sort of then does the big, like, bait and switch. Here are all these promises. Great. Now there's more work. And I think but I think it's important, because it can be, I know that because I had this sort of spiritual experience when I got sober, I tended to wave that like a flag, like for the first more than several years in my sobriety, so that my relationship with my higher power was like this victory lap. I was, that I would share with people. And meanwhile, there was this undercurrent, this ambiance of unmanageability that was still floating around in my life, that I just couldn't seem to address or get a handle on. But that's another story. We must go further, and that means more action. That also speaks to my notion, which I talked about a little last week, which is steps 10, 11, and 12. They, at least in my experience, are not maintenance steps. And you sometimes hear them called maintenance steps. And they have not been maintenance steps for me, for the very reason that we just read. We must go further, and that means more action. So there's a deepening. There is a not just deepening, but a broadening of my sobriety and my spiritual experience. So the next paragraph is entirely direction. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. And I think that there's good reason that Bill put that in there. One, also writing this in the 1930s, they were still very much, even though the nation was coming out of the Depression, the Great Depression, they were still very much, the country was still very much rooted in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. And with the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, there was this mindset that the human mind and the human will could do anything, could conquer any problem. But what Bill is saying runs counter to that. Or at the very least, it takes our mind and our human will and it puts it kind of backstage a little bit, and it puts reliance on God front and center. So the person who declares that prayer is an integral part of how they live their life and how they make decisions and how they solve problems is really placing them, that they might even seem weak or deficient in some way because they're not living according to, I guess you might even call it the general ethos or the general mindset of the time. And I think in many ways that's even stronger today. This sort of self-direction, this, I am the master of my destiny, that kind of thing. So anyway, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And what they then go on to do is present us with a clear and definite 6-step process or 6-point process or 6-question process of, first, the 6 points is about our nightly inventory. Now, notice they're not really telling us how to pray, but what they're doing in the next 2 paragraphs is Bill is really setting us up to be able to employ prayer throughout our day. And so really kind of prepping or coaching us, if you want prayer to work for you, here are 2 of the critical things you need to do, and they involve what we do at night and what we do in the morning. And as I said, the first one is a 6-point process for our nightly inventory. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? There's the first question. And that is a question, so that's in orange. Do we owe an apology? Question number 2. Question number 3. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Question number 4 is, were we kind and loving toward all? 5. What could we have done better? 6. Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? The next sentence or the next question might seem like a separate question, but it's really a continuation of question 6. Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? And it's up to you. If you want to treat that as question 7, please. I mean, I don't have a lock on any of this. But notice also that those 6 or 7 questions, he's saying, I'm going to give you direction about how to set yourselves up for a rich prayer life. But notice all of those questions are rooted not in our relationship with God, but in our relationship with those about us and the contribution we're making in the material world. And I think that is a critical thing to notice, because for me it was real easy to get lost in the clouds with my relationship with my higher power. As I mentioned on a meeting yesterday, when I came into AA, I loved the notion of a higher power. I didn't balk at it at all, and the reason was because in my mind, at least, I could just be off with God and not have to deal with any of you. And if I had a problem or a challenge or something going on in my life, hey, well, okay, thanks for your direction, but really, I'm working with God on this. So, you can keep your direction, and I'm going to be like hooking up with the man. And we'll talk another time about how well that worked out. And but anyway, this notion that our spiritual relationship is deeply interwoven into our relationship with the people about us. And again, I love this phrase, how we move through the world, is, I think, absolutely critical to the way of life, the design for living that our founders proposed for us. And then we go to a warning. We must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, because that would make us feel bad. And sobriety is not about making us feel bad. That's not what it says. It says because that would diminish our usefulness to others. So again, and it's several places. I won't pull out all the, I won't jump to other parts of the text right now, but I think if you've been following along or you're familiar with the big book, there are multiple references to our real purpose in life is to fit ourselves to be of maximum usefulness, maximum service to God and those about us. And so this notion of usefulness as being the critical or the primary objective of this design for living, of this life of sobriety. And then from there, we end it with direction. So that's in green. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So more direction. So again, it brings the concluding direction after those questions again brings us back to our relationship with other human beings and our effectiveness in the world around us. And I just can't talk enough about that, because I just think that distinction is just critical. Also, the other thing I want to mention, and you might see it in the chat, is that so we're talking about our nightly inventory, and I know that there are friends of ours on the meeting today who are very familiar with the nightly inventory process, and maybe they'll share about it. And also, there are a variety. If you just do a Google search, there are a variety of forms, charts, graphs, different things that you can use to help you with that evening inventory process. I found a couple charts online, or a couple forms that are suggested or that you can use, and I put links to that stuff in the chat. In addition, there are I know a couple people who do a nightly inventory using apps. And there's also an app that I've used, but unfortunately not consistently. But it's a great app called My Spiritual Toolkit, and so I put the links to that in the chat as well. So I'm not affiliated with that. Okay, so I don't get any kickbacks. So moving forward. Now it shifts us from our evening process to our morning process. And this one is a little like the evening process was concrete. We're writing it down, and we're really answering these questions. This is a bit, in the morning we are a bit more reflective. And on awakening, and these I'll just read the part that is, we start out with direction. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. So we ask God to really guide our thoughts throughout the day. We're setting an intention for the day with our higher power. And then the rest of the paragraph is a promise. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For, after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Now, what are they referring to there? What they're referring to is the inventory and amends process. And of course, in the middle of those two processes are steps 6 and 7, in which we surrender to God. So bear in mind, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to leapfrog over the steps and over the work, and just try to will myself to live in the promises without having to actually do the work and repair the damage. And again, we'll talk another time, but I can just tell you that did not work out too well. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. We can trust our brains. We can trust our thinking as a result of going through these steps and continuing to go through the steps. So it really counters the notion that we might have heard in meetings before. Like I said, I'm here because I'm not all there. You can't, I can't trust my thinking. What am I? Of course, I reacted that way. I'm a sick alcoholic. Well, so, how else am I going to react? And our book tells us something very, very different. And then I just want to close it out with the next paragraph, and then we'll bring it to a close at the bottom. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. And everything is direction except for the last sentence. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. Those last two sentences, we relax and take it easy, we don't struggle. I thought, well, is that a promise? Is it direction? And I just called it direction. Okay? Because sometimes, I don't know. I mean, I'm sober a long time. I still sometimes have to force myself to relax. And but then we do finish with a promise. We are often surprised how the right answer comes after we have tried this for a while. So again, being able to move through the world in an intuitive manner where we can have this sort of, I'll call it humble confidence in our own thinking and in the relationship with God about us. As long as we are, again, basing the process in our relationships with fellow human beings. So that said, I'm going to bring my part to a close. And so I think we covered a lot there. I'll open it up for some questions.